Hello everyone, welcome to Law Excellence Kalam Mains Answer Writing Program Season 3. In this session, we'll be discussing a question that was asked in the year 2019 in GS Paper 1 UPSC Mains Exam. Okay, now what was the question? Examine the linkages between 19th century's Indian Renaissance and emergence of national identity. It was asked for 10 marks and you have to write within 150 words. Okay, now three words are important in this question. One is examine, and the second word is Indian Renaissance, and the third one is national identity. So what is this word examine? Examine means you have to go to the micro level, you have to go to the root level to understand a particular issue. Okay, now what is this word Indian Renaissance? You have to emphasize on Indian Renaissance. What actually constitute this idea Indian Renaissance? What are the ideas that shape Indian Renaissance? And also the third word, national identity. Now what is exactly national identity? How do you define national identity? So now the question is how the Indian Renaissance ideas and how the Indian Renaissance contributions resulted in emergence of a particular national identity. That's what the questions demand. Now we will see the structuring of the answer. So how we have to structure our answer. Fundamentally, any answer will be categorized into three components: introduction, content, and conclusion. Yesterday also we have discussed this. So how to write an introduction to this question? And in introduction, you have to define the features of Indian Renaissance. So you should know what actually the Indian Renaissance is all about. And you have to establish a link between Indian Renaissance and the formation of a national identity. So yesterday we have also discussed the introduction should really address the demands of the question. And also it has to be written in a very broad perspective. And after writing introduction, you have to write something about the socio-religious landscape that was in existence during the Indian Renaissance period. And why should we write something about the socio-religious conditions of that period? Because we knew that the socio-religious conditions of that period restricted or prohibited the emergence of a national identity, and the socio-religious reform movements tried to bring changes in the existing structure, in the existing socio-religious institutions, and also in the belief system of the people. So now it facilitated in formation of a national identity, which was the bedrock of the political process or the political movement that was launched in the later period. Now after that, you have to define what actually the national identity is. So without knowing what actually national identity is all about, you can't establish a strong linkage between the Indian Renaissance and national identity. Otherwise you'll be ending at writing the contributions of various social religious reform movements and their founders, which is not the demands of the question. Now you have to define national identity, and also you have to establish its link with nationalism. Now how reform movements helped in creation of this national identity? This is what the important part of the question. This is where you have to emphasize a lot. So how these reform movements really facilitated in formation of this identity. Then you have to conclude by comprehending the linkages between the reform movements and formation of national identity. Now we will be discussing one answer which we got from a student. Okay. Indian Renaissance is characterized by aspects of rationality, scientific outlook, humanism, and secularism. So actually Indian Renaissance got inspired by the Enlightenment ideas that was witnessed in Europe in 13th and 15th century. So in Indian, we have seen Renaissance in 19th century. So our Indian Renaissance is an inspiration which our socio-religious reformers got from the Renaissance movement of European countries, especially in Britain. So this is a good way to start your introduction. So not an issue with the three lines. And it is manifested through the socio-religious reform movements of the 19th century. So another name for this Indian Renaissance is socio-religious reform movements. So India witnessed various reform movements like Brahma Samaj, Arya Samaj in the 19th century. So the other name for this reform movements is Indian Renaissance. Why? Because these reform movements, they emphasized on these ideals. They emphasized on idealism, they emphasized on secularism, they emphasized on scientific outlook, and they emphasized on rationality. Okay. Now the Indian Renaissance aimed at socio-cultural rejuvenation. Yes, true. Which prepared a strong ground for the mass political struggle. Yes. By 1860s and 1870s, India's witnessed some sort of political movement. But what formed the basis for this political struggle? For example, in 1880s we have seen the moderate phase, and even in early 20th century we have seen the extremist phase. So this Indian Renaissance movement of the 19th century formed the basis for these political struggles, which was witnessed in late 19th century and earlier 20th century. Now, the Indian Renaissance formed the precursor for the upcoming national identity, which is a prerequisite for nationalism. Okay, a decent introduction where he tried to establish a link between Indian Renaissance and formation of this national identity. And he also tried to define various aspects what really constitute the idea of Indian Renaissance. Okay, a decent introduction. Okay. In structuring of our answer, we also discussed that we have to write something about the existing socio-religious landscape of early 19th century. So here this paragraph tries to address that issue. Okay. Now, prior to 19th century, Indian Renaissance, Indian society was characterized by fragmentation along caste lines, caste inequalities, untouchability, and subjugation of lower castes. So there was lot of discrimination on caste lines. This is one of the important feature of Indian society of 19th century, early 19th century, and before that. Okay. Now, in addition to that, there were social evils like sati, parda system, child marriage, and widowhood against women. So there are some social evils also which discriminated women. In addition to these two evils, we have other existing religious superstitious beliefs and practices which crippled the spirit of human existence and resulted in societal stagnation. Yes. So finally, what this paragraph is trying to say is that there are some social evils which existed during that period, and also there are some religious superstitious beliefs. These two hindered the progress and growth of the society. So this is what the paragraph is trying to mention. Okay, it is fine, and it is also a relevant paragraph to be written in this answer. Then he wrote about various socio-religious reform movements of the 19th century. For example, he quoted about Brahma Samaj of Raja Rahman Rai. And you know, this Brahma Samaj fought against social evils like sati, polygamy, and it also fought against the religious superstition like idol worship, and it also opposed caste oppression. So these are some principles on which this Brahma Samaj fought for. Okay. And we also have Theosophical Society of Annie Besant, which promoted the concept of universal brotherhood. And we also have Arya Samaj, which tried to revive the ancient practices and the good practices that were prevalent in the ancient times. And you can quote many other socio-religious reform movements like Ramakrishna Mission of Swami Vivekananda, and you can also quote other socio-religious reform movements of Muslims and Parsis too. But remember, you have to write this in 150 words. Okay. And our point here of quoting these religious reform movements is to mention those principles which helped us or which helped in emergence of a national identity. That's why see here he mentioned about concept of brotherhood. And also he is mentioning about social evils and religious superstition which undermined or which crippled the independence of a human's existence. So this is very much important. An independence of a human existence is needed to cherish his dreams, to cherish his goals. Okay. He also mentions about Aligarh movement of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and which focused on spreading Western scientific education, and also which tried to bring some sort of reformation in Islamic religion. Okay. And what is the emphasis of all these socio-religious reform movements is they want to bring some sort of enlightenment in the masses. Okay. And also they want to create a sense of belongingness by promoting principles like universal brotherhood. For example, one of the principle promoted by Theosophical Society of Annie Besant is to achieve universal brotherhood. Okay. This paragraph is also relevant. Of course, if you want to quote more number of socio-religious reform movements, you can write various other reform movements also. But remember, you should not end up in writing various socio-religious reform movements and missing the central lessons what the question is demanding. Okay. And Next paragraph, he is trying to define or make some meaning of what actually constitute this national identities, because you should know what actually national identity is, then only you can really establish a strong linkage between Indian Renaissance and the emergence or the formation of a national identity. So what actually constitutes national identity? He tried to define a very important term, national consciousness or collective consciousness. A collective consciousness is a prerequisite for the emergence of a national identity. True. Which is a fundamental ingredient of nationalism. Yes. So national identity is part of nationalism, and collective consciousness is one important aspect of national identity. And what is this national identity? It is the one which have, yes, a shared experiences, beliefs, and a shared vision. Yes, these two are important ingredients of this national identity. For the emergence of this national identity, there should be a shared imagination. The Indian Renaissance was successful in stimulating an identity of oneness. Yes, this oneness, this belongingness is very much important in formation of that identity. Okay, and in that aspect, this Indian Renaissance movement was successful. Now we will see the important part of the question: how these reform movements resulted in creation of a national identity. That is what we have to look into. Now here he gave some points about how the socio-religious reform movements resulted in emergence of that national identity. The first thing is, he was mentioning about universal brotherhood principle. Yes, these it is an important principle almost promoted by many reform movements. It's not only the Theosophical Society, even other socio-religious reform movements, they emphasized on universal brotherhood and fraternity. Okay, and universal brotherhood espoused by the socio-religious reform movements created a sense of belongingness among the masses. Yes, it is a very important thing. Next thing, efforts to eradicate social evils against women, followed by providing education, emancipated women, and led them to participate in nationalistic struggle. Yes, and we have seen like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Raja Rahman Rai, and even deep south we have Kandukuri Veeraslingam and other socio-religious reformers like Jyotiba Phule in Maharashtra. These people promoted women education. It empowered them, and finally it led in participation of women in nationalistic struggle. For example, if you see in Gandhian phase, for example in civil disobedience movement, you have seen participation of women on a larger scale, and the breeding ground or the facilitating ground is given by the socio-religious reform movements. And the next one is the opposition to caste inequalities and upper caste domination helped the lower caste to come out of centuries of subordination and to participate on equal lines in the struggle. We have various socio-religious reform movements like Satyasodak Samaj, Justice Party movement, which fought against upper classes domination. Okay. Now the next point is, reform movements created a churning in the ideas and ideologies of the people, which reflected in modern art forms. Yes, it is an important contribution of the socio-religious reform movements. These art forms, they are resulted in development of a patriotic regional literature, and also search for pure form of classical music, and also they constructed new ideals of womanhood, and these were reflected in the writings of Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Tagore, and Iqbal, and even in Subramanyam Bharati. Okay, though the answer tried to cover many points here, maybe I felt some more extra points can be written here. For example, the important contribution of socio-religious reform movement is the idea of Swaraj. Yes, this is the idea of Swaraj was promoted by Dayanand Saraswati of Arya Samaj, and which formed the major demand of extremism in the later phase. That is an important contribution you can write. And also the socio-religious reform movements tried to instill confidence in the civilizational superiority of Indians, because British always try to undermine the superiority of Indians. They want to always portray themselves as superior, and they are called themselves as civilized, and they want to treat Indians as barbaric, right? Now the socio-religious reform movements tried to revive the ancient heritage, and it tried to instill confidence within the among the masses. This is one important contribution, and you can of course write as many points as possible, because this is what the central crux of the answer. And also you can write about socio-religious reform movements role in creating political education. For example, Raja Rahman Rai, through his journals, critically analyzed various political issues and spread political education. And this political education is very much important because it was helpful in formation of an identity and also to understand the exploitative nature of the British. Okay, now he wrote about conclusion here. So Indian Renaissance provided the ideological foundation of modern Indian nationalism. Yes, it's good. The socio-religious reform movements, in addition to unleashing the human spirit and potential, rejuvenated society and provided the adequate thrust for the political struggle, which culminated in achieving independence to the nation. Okay, this is a fine conclusion where he tried to comprehend whatever he written in the content, and also he tried to establish the broad linkage between the Indian Renaissance and achieving the national identity, which in turn resulted in achieving independence to the nation. Okay, fine. I personally feel that answer addressed almost all aspects of the question, especially the crux. He could have written more number of points, and other than that, his introduction conclusion is very balanced, and content is also fine, which almost addressed various aspects of the question. But he could have written more number of points in the, especially how the socio-religious reform movements contributed in the emergence of a national identity. Now we will see the question for tomorrow's discussion. Again, this question was asked in year 2019, the same year. Explain how the foundations of modern world were laid by the American and French Revolution. It is part of world history. So this is the first question we'll be discussing under world history. So it was asked for 15 marks. So you have to write 250 words. And tomorrow we will see so what are the fundamental principles of American and French Revolution and how it contributed for the emergence of a modern world. Okay, and with that we have done with today's discussion. So thank you one and all.